Jacqueline Morris, and basically I'm here to talk about the history of Lacralo. And to start the history of Lacralo, we have to go pretty much all the way back to 2003 or 2002 thereabouts, and the World Summit on the Information Society. And I was there, and internet governance was shifted off the first treaty and put into the second one, and they formed the working group on internet governance. ICANN was around because there were many proposals to basically shift the functions of ICANN over to the ITU. And I remember having many conversations with people from ICANN where they were touting to me the multi-stakeholder model of ICANN and how wonderful it was. And I did my research, and a lot of us were concerned. So we did our research and we looked it up, and we said, but the end users are not really represented, because at the time they had the interim ALAC, which were people of civil society, but who were not really representing actual end users. And the proposal to create regional organizations and at-large structures, which would have been organizations that dealt directly with end users, to somehow be agents of ICANN in reaching out to end users, getting information to and from them, and getting input from them, it was in the bylaws, but it hadn't been implemented. And after the WSIS, well, somewhere around 2004, they decided, yes, let's get a lot of us who were in WSIS said, let's get involved in this and let's see if we can make this happen. So, applied to the NOMCOM, came on board in ICANN. I was one of the members of the at-large advisory committee, but the interim at-large, because we didn't have any rallies yet. And we started, and we went around looking for people to join us in this endeavor. And in 2006, we had the first formation meeting for Rallo, which was Lacralo, and we had that meeting in Buenos Aires. And Carlton could tell you more about that meeting, because he remembers exactly how he got to be involved.
Well, I'm Carlton Samuels. I, at the time, was CIO and University Director of IT at the University of the West Indies. And I had already started an Internet Governance Forum along with a colleague of mine named Courtney Jackson, who was the Deputy Director in the Office of Utilities Regulation in Jamaica. And in preparation for the WSIS, a colleague of mine named Roderick Sanderton had a preparatory meeting which he invited me to. And I met quite a few of the people in the Caribbean at the time who were involved in the internet governance issues. This was my first kind of wading into the IG area. In 2006, just prior to one morning, I was in my office on the campus of Mona campus in Kingston, and I had a call from a youngster named Jacob Malthus, who was then working for ICANN. He's Canadian. He was working for ICANN as a technical or regional liaison for the Caribbean. And he called me up and he said, could he come to see me? And I said yes, of course. And so he came up and he said, well, he got my name from this lady, Jacqueline Morris. And he wanted to know whether or not I would be interested in participating in a new governance organization that they were trying to build for the Latin American Caribbean region. It was like a Tuesday. And I said, yes, well, I would be, because I told him about my our IGF meeting forum that we started with Courtney Jackson, and he knew about that. And so he said, by the way, the organizing meeting is going to be held in Buenos Aires on Saturday and Sunday of this week. And we want you to come to Buenos Aires, and in order to get to work for Saturday, you have to leave from Friday. So I said, okay. They arranged for the trip, and we got to Buenos Aires. We got to Buenos Aires to the hotel around about 10 o'clock Saturday morning, and I was a whole bunch of us, including Jacqueline Morris. There's a fellow named Sebastian. Sebastian, the Argentinian fellow. Yes. And there was Eric Iriarte Ejon from Peru, and several other people. Lance Hines is there, and we started working immediately to try to scope what this regional at large organization is going to be. There are other persons there: Carlos Aguirre, Andres, Piazza, Sergio Salinas Porto, a couple others. Anyway, we worked for quite some time. We worked all that day Saturday, late into the night, Saturday night. We started early Sunday morning, worked all the way until about 7 o'clock Sunday night, and we then adjourned, and I took a plane and went back to my office in Jamaica the next morning. That was how we started. And then between then we started having conversations about the organizing documents and so on. We decided very early that for a multi-stakeholder organization, and in order to allow for all voices to be heard, we would model the rules after the rules for the UN. And since I was we had a staff member who was supporting us at the time, and he was the only one. Nick, you remember Nick?
Yeah, Nick Ashton Hart.
Nick Ashton Hart is an Englishman.
A lot of work with the UN in various capacities. He had worked on, I think, housing programs and stuff like that. So he was very au courant with the UN process and procedures and so on.
Right.
And he was instrumental in getting these documents properly drafted.
Yes, Nick was extremely important, a critical part of developing and devising the instruments that created Lacralo. I was the principal drafter. We simply took the UN from rules from several of the UN organizations, and we kind of simplified them and created the rules. But the objective was that we would create guiding documents that would actually ensure that small countries, small minorities would have a voice in the region.
I think it was basically to enshrine the principle of participation by all.
Right.
That the UN has. So whether you are a country with 1 billion people or a country with 10,000 people, you both have an equal voice to be heard in the organization. And to that extent, we created a very, I think, somewhat complex way of voting. But part of the idea was that we weren't expecting to vote on much, because another guiding principle that came out of that very collegial, wonderful meeting in Buenos Aires was that we would do almost everything by consensus. We would have very little bureaucracy. The first and only position that we had was that of secretariat, purely because there needed to be someone to organize the documents and make sure that things went according to schedule and according to procedure. But that person did not have any any more rights or any more rank to direct the organization than anyone else.
and at the time for my sins, I was the inaugural secretariat. And that explains why I was intimately involved with the formation of the documents. There's two other things that needs to be said here. And the first one is that the organizing documents, the rules of procedure, we actually created, the original document was done in Spanish. And that was our intent, to be inclusive. Because although we knew that the working language of ICANN is English, we were very keen on ensuring that our Spanish-speaking friends felt included in in organizing the document. So that was one thing. The other organizing principle was, as Jacqueline noted, we deliberately constructed the procedure, the rules, to enable, to promote decision by consensus. It was very important to us from the start. And
it actually worked for quite a while.
It actually worked for a little while. But then we find that one of the things that we feared more than anything else, there was, we feel, at least I will say, in my opinion, it seems that there was an attempt to capture. There was a host of at-large structures that were developed, seemed to have the same name. They seemed to be associated together.
Can I interrupt you a minute and say, long before all that happened, what we found was in 2009 in Mexico,
yes,
we created the position of president as well. We created the position of president as well. So now we had a president and a secretariat. The duties of the secretariat were not changed in the documentation, but the president was added in, so that instead of having just one person in charge of managing all the procedures and documents and so forth, we had two. It makes life a little bit easier. Unfortunately, I think the title of president started putting ideas into people's heads, and it started to become more of a, ooh, the president is something very important. And that was, I believe, a little bit away from the ideals of the organization. So where we are now is that we have Carlton's consideration that there is a perception that there is a group that is attempting to capture the organization. The only other issue that we had a lot was the issue of interpretation and translation. And I would say that we're very proud that Lacralo and Nick Ashtonhart led the charge for ICANN to translate documents into the 6 UN languages and to have simultaneous interpretation in different languages in the meetings, to make sure that we have all the documents translated so that when we do outreach to our end users, we can have material for them in their own language so that they can understand something. And the only other thing I think is that one of the issues that we have with Lacralo now, and part of the reason we're doing this video, is because a lot of people who have come in since the early days do not know the history. They don't know the principles by which Lacralo was founded. And those we'd like to repeat are consensus, inclusion, and fairness.
Give everybody a voice. Part of the problem that we have now is that although we were in the forefront of fighting for other languages, and we are competent in speaking English, which is the working language of ICANN, we wanted to be sure that the people behind these organizations actually could access the information about Lacralo, about ICANN. That was the major reason why we fought so hard to have other languages included. It was not a question of us being able to participate. If it was just that, we would have no interest in promoting the inclusion of other language groups. So it is a very strange thing now to be seen to be saying that we are about exclusion. It's very important that we put that on the record.